Welcome everyone. My name is Deirdre Walsh. I'm the Activism Coordinator with Amnesty International Ireland. We're here today for the Fáilte Lughnasa. It's great to gather people together in global effort and solidarity for claiming our sexual and reproductive rights around the world. We have two excellent guests, Justyna Wydrzyńska from Poland and Tarah Demant from the United States. We'll be introducing those two guests in a minute. So the agenda will run as follows. Fiona Crowley will be speaking next, also from Amnesty Ireland. She's our interim human rights coordinator, and Fiona will be giving a full introduction to our two guests and also speaking with Justyna and Tarah and fielding any of your questions. So please do send questions through the questions and answer function in Zoom, or any comments or reflections that you might have. Yeah, we're really looking forward to a really great discussion with Justyna and Tarah. We'll also be sharing some action links in the chat as we go through. And we really hope that this can be an opportunity for coming together in solidarity to react against the global crackdown on our sexual and reproductive rights. And finally, I'll be recapping on the next steps and actions we can take individually and collectively. And we'll be finished by 3 p.m. So I'll hand you over to Fiona Crowley now. Thank you.
Thank you, Deirdre, and thanks all for joining us. And if there are any glitches along the way, please do forgive us. So just it's the nature of remaining in the online world. So today we are obviously hearing from our colleagues Justyna and Tarah. The Supreme Court in the US is overturning of Roe v. Wade was the culmination of a decades-long campaign in the US to control the bodies and lives of women, girls, and people who can become pregnant. And this war against women's bodies and rights hasn't just been waged in the US, of course, but right across the globe, including here in Europe. So what's been happening for many years and what is currently happening in Poland is a very abject example, with continual efforts to further restrict what is already severely limited access to abortion in Poland, and with the ongoing reprisals against and intimidation of providers and activists. So action is clearly needed by us all to better protect and safeguard sexual and reproductive rights across the world. But today we're focusing in on these two countries, the US and Poland. We in Ireland, of course, continue to call on our own government to move in the right direction rather than capitulate to these reactionary forces. We are calling continually on our government to fix the many serious gaps in our own abortion law and in our own abortion care policy and practice. And there are many here in the audience today, I could see from the list, who are leading that fight. But we also need to get the Irish government to engage the US and Poland bilaterally and multilaterally and in a meaningful way. So it'll be very useful to hear today from our speakers about what we can do here in Ireland. So I will just move forward to introduce our two speakers. Justyna Wydrzyńska is a founder of the Abortion Dream Team, which is an activist collective that campaigns against abortion stigma in Poland and offers trainings and non-judgmental advice on how to get a safe abortion. In November of last year, she was charged with the offence of helping with an abortion and possession of medicines without authorisation for the purpose of introducing them to the market, and faces 3 years in prison for something that clearly should never be a criminal offence in the first place. Charges against her appear to be intended to punish her activism and her efforts to ensure people's rights to access safe and legal abortion in Poland. Her hearing has been adjourned until later this year, so we continue to watch that with concern and interest. Tarah Demant is the Interim National Director of Programs, Advocacy and Government Affairs at Amnesty International USA. She has over 20 years experience in global gender issues and has advocated for human rights at the United Nations, the White House, and with many foreign governments. Tarah has been leading Amnesty USA's campaign to stop the control of the bodies of women, girls, and people who can become pregnant for many years. And this is an issue all the more pressing since the overturning of Roe v. Wade. So that's just a very, very summary introduction to two very amazing women. and they may speak a little bit, will hopefully speak a little bit more about themselves and their work when we get to them. So just to kick this off in more of a sort of a, I suppose, Q&A sort of format, I will now ask each of our two guests three questions. Then we'll have a Q&A session afterwards, at which in which the audience can put forward questions, and we will put forward as many as we can to that. But Deirdre will explain that as we move into that particular session. So without further ado, as we say in Ireland, Justyna, can you explain perhaps a little bit more about the case against you? Because like to us, it's I mean, however bad the criminal laws are in Ireland, there seem nothing quite so perverse as what you've been charged with. And if you could also explain the other sorts of reprisals that are faced by your colleagues and yourself in the abortion dream team. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I want to thank you for the invitation for this webinar. It's an honor for me every time when I receive this kind of invitations. About the charges you just mentioned, I shared my own pills with a person who really, really needed them. She was in a situation of a crisis, not only with unwanted pregnancy, but also the home violence. And because of her story and my own story were very, very close. I also, in my previous life, I've been in a relationship with a person who was very abusive, and I know exactly how it is to live a person like this. To fight for your freedom, to protect your kids. And this is why I decided to share my own pills. I did it as an individual woman who helped other women, who was really asking about help, was begging about help, not an abortion activist as I am from 16 years. So this is why her husband informed the police, and the police came to their house, and this is why we've both been caught in this situation. Now I'm facing a trial and trying to being somehow a person in this country who is protecting those we know that sharing their own pills. We know because we know stories like parents, we've been buying pills for their kids, like partners been buying pills for other partners, friends been helping other friends. So we know that those kind of stories happens here, and if somehow we will the verdict will be I'm not guilty, then it will be very good for all of us, because then we will be able to share our own pills. But I know how the law in Poland looks like, and the probability of this is very, very low. But I have good alternatives, so I hope it will. We will fight for this, and we will push the law somehow.
Thank you.
Also, because the last sentence, maybe not the last, but just few others, and because the abortion dream team is very visible, we are very visible, and from last months we've been receiving a lot of information for hearings in the police stations, because now the Polish anti-choice people think that the blame on every activity is on us. So from time to time, even last month, I've been on police twice for the hearings. And from those cases which we've been, now I hope that they all be dropped.
Thank you. And could you give us a very short kind of summary of the current context in Poland? I mean, just a little bit of information about how sexual and reproductive rights are under threat.
So here in Poland, we say that our situation is not very bad as in for example, other countries. We can order abortion pills by ourselves. We can take them, and we can do abortions, but up to 22 weeks, and we are not criminalized because of this. We can help, ask for help, like for the support. Maybe not the help is not a good word. We can ask for the support, like organizations like Abortion Dream Team, like Kobiety w Sieci, like activists around this country who are existing, who are helping. And we can get this support during taking abortion pills. We can go abroad. We are not prosecuted because of this. We can ask our like close people, friends to take us abroad, and they are not prosecuted somehow. But if we want to use those legal abortions in the hospitals, which we have because of two cases, the sexual violence and when our health and risk is in danger, then it's kind of tricky because our last data from 2021 shows that about more than 20 people got abortions because of the risk and health issues, and only 2 got abortions because of the sexual violence. So it means that even if we have the legal abortion because of these 2 cases, the access is none. So we have to travel abroad. Those who are in unwanted pregnancies because of the sexual violence, then they most often use abortion pills, which you can buy very easily, and for us it's not very expensive. And those who are in unwanted pregnancies, but they have to, they decided to stop them, they have to travel abroad. And it is really good that we can receive kind of support from abroad.
Okay, thank you. And I think you've answered in part my third question, but which was, what are the impact on women and pregnant people from those abortion restrictions? But is there any additional impacts beyond what you've said there? And I'm thinking, like, say, maybe what we're experiencing here in Ireland is the impact additionally on people who can't travel or who can't kind of like access, maybe the abortion pills online and stuff, like people with disabilities or people with migration issues.
Mm-hmm. So luckily in 2019, the initiative Abortion Without Borders started. So we try to help and we, Abortion Dream Team, Kobiety w Sieci, those both organizations are in this initiative. And I know that you, as people living in Ireland, you also know the Abortion Support Network who invited us to this initiative. So luckily, we can help all those people who cannot, who previously couldn't travel abroad because of the language barriers, because of the financial barriers, because of the disability barriers. We try to break those myths that we cannot travel because of lack of money and lack of language knowledge. So those who before they cannot use this abortions in abroad. Now I hope, and also those from the migrants people, we know we have these cases, so they can travel. If you are in Poland and you are legally here, and you can travel also to Netherlands, which is still in the European Union, and there you can stop the pregnancy in second trimester. You cannot travel to UK, in which we can stop the pregnancy up to 24 weeks. But so still we have possibilities in other countries, because these initiatives let us be together and find places where we can help other people with unwanted and wanted pregnancies, and when people decided to stop them.
Great, thank you so much, Justyna. So I'm going to move on to Tarah now, and there will be plenty of other questions. You will be getting more questions. So Tarah, just in terms of the impact of women and pregnant people, impact on women and pregnant people in the US in the wake of Roe v. Wade, could you tell us a little bit about that, but also, the previously existing restrictions at state level, because it isn't just post Roe v. Wade, right? That this has been an issue, and we can come to, like what's been happening since then, but just, what is happening in the US at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy to be here, and so pleased to be able to speak with and alongside Justyna. And a lot of those situations and those themes are very similar. So, folks know about Roe v. Wade. It's the Supreme Court ruling from 1973, which established a baseline legality for abortion, but that does not mean that since then people have had the access to abortion care that they need. And so even before the overturning of Roe here in June, we had a vast a real patchwork of abortion care in the United States, and the country is physically very, very, very big. And so you would have people who maybe it wasn't technically illegal in their state, but it was functionally inaccessible. And so you'd still have people having to travel potentially thousands of miles to get basic care, or you'd have restrictions put in place that demand that you go to 2 or 3 visits before you can get the abortion care you need, or that you have to, that the abortion clinic has to have surgical options, which don't make any sense, which aren't actually there for abortion care, but are really there to restrict abortion. So, you know, before the fall of Roe, these restrictions were coming hundreds every year, hundreds of them every year at the state level. And so it's been a really tough landscape for abortion care in the United States and for other sexual reproductive rights that are deeply intertwined. You know, the spaces where we see the most abortion restrictions now are also the states and the areas which have the least amount of sexual and reproductive education, that have the least amount of access to birth control, and that there are other rights, obviously, that are also denied in those states. They have the lowest level of education opportunities. They have the lowest or the highest levels of income disparity. So it's a really complex and interrelated problem here. After June, after the overturn of Roe, it's gotten markedly worse. There's been a period of extreme confusion and real fear, I think, is the sort of core of that, but extreme confusion as laws have changed very, very quickly in some places and get flipped back and forth in others. So in the United States, obviously, we have the US federal government, but then we have 50 separate state governments and Washington, DC, which is not a state. So 51 separate state level governments that run their own laws. And in theory, they're connected to the federal laws, but oftentimes it's like running an individual country in every state. And some of these spaces are gigantic. Obviously, you think about Texas, Alaska is half the size of the contiguous United States. These are massive spaces that are setting their own laws. And many of those places have outlawed abortion either totally or near totally. So in 17 states, abortion is restricted totally or near totally. We expect that number to be probably around 26 by this time next year. A number of states had trigger laws. These are laws that triggered once Roe was overturned. So these are laws that had been passed at the state level that were waiting for the overturn of Roe. This has been a long and consorted campaign by the extreme right, and it's been set up to succeed in exactly the way it has. You might have heard there've been some challenges to some of these laws, but they're not at that federal level, constitutional level. They're now at the state level, and some of those challenges have been on medical grounds, that you can't, that there ultimately there's laws by which doctors have to save the life of their patients. That is their job. And if you have an abortion ban in place in your state, that can't happen, right? So there's been some of those challenges, but the court system is very conservative in the United States right now. And so sort of depending on the court is a really dubious prospect. So ultimately what we've seen, and the stories are coming out and have come out already, is that people who need abortion care are either having to travel vast distances, or frankly are being forced to give birth. And so the long-term data on this, it's going to be a decade before we know the long-term numbers, but we know from experience here in the United States, and of course this bears out in other countries as well, that what this does is increase rates of poverty. It disproportionately impacts the poor in the United States. In the US, it also disproportionately impacts Black and brown women, Indigenous women in the US, and trans people who already have some of the hardest time finding healthcare, who can get pregnant, are least likely to be able to access abortion care. So it's a really stark and terrifying time, particularly as state level legislatures. So each state runs, much like Congress in the US, they run their own sort of Congress or parliament. And those have gotten very, very conservative. And that's part of the effort of the extreme right, is to make those political spaces very conservative. What folks might not know, if you've been watching this in the media, is that over 70% of people in the United States support the right to abortion at least through the first trimester, which is like 24 to 26 weeks, right? 70%. But if you watch the news, it seems like it's this 50-50 battle, right? Like 50% of the people think this is horrific. 50% of the people think it's totally fine to restrict people's rights to control their bodies, right? And that's just not the reality. But the political landscape has been designed so that the minority, the pretty extreme minority, has a lot of local control, which is what built up to the Supreme Court control. So it's a very difficult landscape moving forward, but we do have broad, massive support. One of the good things to come out of this is that, or one of the positive signs is, in the first vote that was taken after Roe fell is in the state of Kansas. And if folks don't know the landscape here very well, Kansas is almost directly in the middle of the United States, and it is a very politically conservative state. It is a Republican state, not Republican leaning, it is a Republican state. It is a deep red state, meaning it's a deeply conservative state. And they overwhelmingly rejected what would have been a constitutional amendment to their Kansas constitution that would have further restricted abortion. And that was a 63%. That's a massive political margin in the United States. And that meant that people who normally vote conservatively are also opposed to abortion restrictions, right? So there's a lot of hope there as we see people really stepping up to fight for their rights and for the rights of others.
Great, thank you. And conveniently, you've covered off my second question, which was specifically about positive developments with particular reference to Kansas. So moving straight on to question number 3. So could you possibly just maybe set out in summary form Amnesty USA's approach to the campaign on this issue at the moment, and including kind of like, work in kind of partnership with others. And in particular, we're curious about, the focus in sort of like the campaign actions that we've been receiving on certain US governors and US states. And I suppose as part of that answer, if you could just tell me if there's a strong movement in the US to help, campaign for the protection of sexual and reproductive rights.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's more positive developments to start with, right? The president has signed a couple of executive orders, which any US president has pretty limited power in lots of ways, but there are many things the president can do and has done most of them to protect information access, to protect people's privacy, and when they do seek abortion care, to protect the right to travel across state borders, which is being threatened. So they're increasing things that we've been lobbying on that are really good signs to continue that work. So the campaign that we've launched in the United States is a many layered campaign, and it's 1 at the state level, 2 at the federal level being Congress, and then 3 at the federal level being the administration or the president. And under the president are a number of, offices of health and offices of education, things like that. So that all falls under the president. The reason that we've spent a lot of time at the state level is twofold. 1, abortion is a very personal thing that happens to you in your body where you live. And where you live in the United States is in a state that has different laws and different ways of restricting your rights. And that is where the power lies because of the overturn of Roe. So immediately, the immediate way to get people access to their rights is going to be winning at the state level, or like in Kansas, further preventing harm at the state level. So 1 is that immediacy of how people can access the abortion care and the rights that they deserve and that they need. But the second thing is that, the overturn of Roe was a state game. It happened at the state level, stacking up state, very local. I mean, we're talking like city and district courts, county courts, then state courts, and also state laws that challenge these federal rulings. And that's the type of thing that's going to give us the long-term federal victory, particularly in the courts, but not exclusively. It also impacts Congress and the way that Congress sees this issue. So winning at the state level not only protects the rights of people in Kansas or in California or wherever it is, but starts to build that legal precedent in the United States, as our law runs on legal precedent, so that these cases can be brought back before the Supreme Court. And so that when Congress is in a place where there's a political moment, there's more galvanized pressure. So we've spent a lot of time focusing on states in general. Many of the folks on the call probably took action and emailed every governor in the United States. That's a really important action. There are a number of governors, and every state is different, but there are a number of governors who, there's a lot of money in the anti-abortion movement, but there is still a sense that like the United States likes to think of itself as a world leader. And when you have people from all over the world emailing you in Kansas or Montana or Idaho, saying like, we're watching, that's a big deal. These are states that aren't usually the focus of international eyes. So that's part of that work. We've also focused in Amnesty USA on 4 specific states that have abortion battles coming up much more quickly, that are real tipping point states that could go either way and start to domino out other states. So that's part of why you'll see some emphasis on specific states while we continue to work across other states. At the presidential level, we've worked to get as many, they're band-aids, you know, because every president is going to be different. So the next president could just immediately undo them, but to really get these protections in place as much as we can, as quickly as we can. And we've seen real achievement there. And the president has done almost everything that he's able to do in this circumstance, including passing protections, again, on access to medication abortion, like Justyna was talking about. Almost half of abortions in the US are via medication. And so being able to mail medication across federal mail needs to be protected, and states can't pass laws that restrict federal mail. He's also established a Department of Justice, that's our Ministry of Justice in the United States, task force that are going to pursue states that overreach legally with their restrictions. So those are big deals. We're still calling on him to declare a national emergency, which loosens up more resources and a little more federal power. So that's happening. And then the third is Congress, right? Ultimately, Congress passes the laws that the Supreme Court rules on. And the Supreme Court ruled on the law, which is our Constitution, but Congress passed the Constitution back in 1776. So like these are, I think 1780 actually, these are laws that Congress needs to pass. We need an abortion protection law. We need laws that protect our sexually reproductive rights. Again, folks will not be surprised that this is not a very politically hopeful moment in terms of that type of action in Congress, but we will continue to be pressuring Congress at every level, particularly with our constituent lobbying, to make sure that they understand that voting against abortion rights is unacceptable and will have political consequences, so that we can get to the point where then we can pass a federal law. So it won't matter if states want to pass these restrictions, because there'll be a strong federal law in place.
Thank you so much, Tarah. If I could maybe just go back to Justyna, just to ask you what you think that people in Ireland can do. In view, like, you know, what are the things that perhaps in terms of we can maybe ask the Irish government to do, or that we can ask sort of the Polish authorities to do from Ireland?
Yes, you can ask why we should travel abroad, and we don't have these laws here. Even we have new surveys about the society, how society sees abortion on demand, and the newest surveys shows that about 62% of people agrees that we should have legal abortion up to 12 weeks. So from my point of view, you can also tell from the Irish perspective how the legal abortions, what is the difference between the legal abortions and the access to abortion, because this is very different. Legal abortion doesn't mean that we have access to this, and we know that it happened in Ireland when you had the law, and you still had the problem with access to abortion. So you can do this.
Sorry about that. I was just double jobbing there. Yeah, trying to reply to somebody else on one screen. In terms of the, it was interesting, Tarah, talking about public opinion. One of the questions that we have here is public opinion in Ireland was also, we didn't realize it, I suppose, until we started, doing polling, and others had done polling, and then the government did polling, and found that there was actually significant majority in favor of reasonably progressive abortion access here in Ireland, at a time when the media was well, maybe like initially reporting, and then very much like pretending, in the face of polling, that it was only a minority of people who were fully, say pro-choice, and it was almost a time, and there was this therefore kind of like sort of kind of almost like seen as kind of like a battle of two minorities, as opposed to a very, very silent majority in favor of women's rights. Do you see, and do you see that at all in Poland? I think particularly, Justyna, and then maybe in America, you said like that the majority are in favor, but just, you know, maybe, so I'll come to you first, Justyna, just in terms of, say, you know, Polish public opinion and the degree to which maybe the media are kind of, you know, a problem too, because they are dealing with this as almost a debate between two polar opposites.
To be honest, I see that and more about media pro-abortion than anti-abortion, and we see that the society here, because of those 3 deaths because of my case also, it's changing dramatically. The society sees how big impact those laws has, and what is happening with people. Even if they go to they will be protected by doctors, and doctors like do nothing because they're afraid to act, they're afraid to save our lives. So the situation is like is dramatically changed in even in half a year. So I hope, and we have heard even this month that after the one of the women death because of the fetal abnormalities in a hospital, when the prosecutor dropped the case, and now they go and again with to the media because of this, and they start to like open this case again. So the society and the media really help to push this, to push the pro-abortion movement forward, and are with us in this, because it's really too much. It's really too much. We don't have to die because of the law.
Great, thanks. And Tarah, just in terms of, say, I mean, you've spoken about the, you know, public opinion there, but in terms of the role of the media, and there's actually another question that came through to both of you as well, which is the degree to which you know, personal stories affect people. The point is being made that had a huge impact in Ireland. I mean, you know, women shouldn't have to tell their personal stories, but they did. So it's an enormous ask, but do you think that would work in the US and Poland? So maybe Tarah, if you want to cover that off first, and then Justyna, I'll come back to you.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so much similarity to Justyna, what you were saying, and that's that, you know, one of the problems with the way that abortion has been talked about in the media here, as though it's some sort of dark, dirty secret that people have to like really struggle through, and like lots of people have abortions and go to work like the next day, like they're fine, right? So part of that has been the destigmatization of abortion, and so much of that, of course, is your work, Justyna, in Poland as well, is destigmatizing abortion is a huge problem that the media is super stigmatized, and again represents this like, well, it's really difficult, 50% of people, and it's just not like, those aren't facts. And the way that they represent that is by having like the both viewpoints kind of baloney, one viewpoint being in science and the other screaming that like, you know, we have people who believe that the education system here is so bad. We have people that believe that you know, a woman's or pregnant person's body is not attached to a fetus. I mean, like, there's just like the level of education about abortion is also very, very low, and the media doesn't only not help that, it actually actively hurts that by peddling these types of conspiracies or just lies about what abortion is. And also by treating it as this sort of like dark, dirty thing we need to be really scared about. So destigmatizing abortion is a huge part of that. And that's part of our commitment at Amnesty USA, is the destigmatization of abortion and understanding and helping people see that abortion is healthcare, and we wouldn't regulate your root canal either. So that's part of it. The huge movement of people sharing their abortion stories in the United States has been really, really, really helpful. And that's, you know, the statistics in the US, and I think they bear out in other countries as well, is that 1 in 4 women will have had an abortion in her lifetime. And most people just don't talk about their abortions because of that stigma. And so it means that when people are thinking about abortion, it's this sort of abstract issue, right? This sort of potentially moral or religious issue to them, as opposed to just like a fact of someone's life that they know and that they love. And I think that's made a big change already, is that people sharing that they've had abortions, that what it meant to them to be able to choose to have an abortion, and how their lives are better because they were able to choose the direction of it. And that's made a big difference. And I mean, like you said, you know, Fiona, people shouldn't have to tell their healthcare stories, but they do really, really matter. One of the things I think was very telling, and every state in the US is different, to be very clear, but one of the things that was very telling in Kansas was that the number that sort of Republican dads, so these are from the conservative party, but who identified as fathers, the percentage that voted no to these further restrictions was much, much, much higher than previous votes. And so I think part of that is that relationship. You know, I think at Amnesty, we would say you shouldn't have to have a relationship to someone to care about their rights, but like that matters when you imagine your daughter or your trans son or your cousin or your wife or whatever it is, right, that you may or may not have a relationship to, and understand that like these have real consequences. Like Justyna was saying, they're not like a moral victory to watch people then not be able to control their bodies, to be forced to give birth. I mean, these are, when it's taken in this abstract thing, it becomes this very theoretical idea. I mean, you talk to someone who's been forced to give birth, or someone who's lost a partner because of a dangerous pregnancy they couldn't terminate, or someone who just wasn't able to control their lives, like that matters. And that's been a really important part of changing the tide here in the United States, and will continue to be.
Great, thank you. And sorry, over to you, Justyna, just in terms of the degree to which it's possible and then useful for women and pregnant people to tell their stories.
We noticed that this is the huge. This have a huge impact on the legal situation and on how people sees abortions. We know that when those cases about deaths, and even in my case, example of my case. When on the beginning they made me a seller of pills because I just shared the pill, my own pills, and when we started to like say more about this case, that this is not only about abortion, but this is about how women in general are treated in this country, then this started to be something different. The story made it completely different, it shows in a different way. And we know also that it's really hard because of the stigmatization to get these stories and to get the people who will like be visible and show them their faces and will say, this is me, I have had an abortion, and you cannot judge me because of this, because they're really afraid about how they be treated by they close people, how they by their siblings, by the society in the town they live. So we know that this stigmatization is huge, but still we try to keep those stories. People if they want to share their stories, they can send to our pages, and we publish them. And now it's thousands of those stories, and we know this how this huge impact has. But on the other hand, we have journalists who call to us and ask, could you give me a contact to women who was raped and who is a teenager? But hello, we are normal women. Most of us have kids, have families, and do abortions because they want to do, but they are not raped. They are not teenagers. They are not blonde or whatever. We are normal women.
Yeah, Justyna, that's been a really interesting problem here too, where the cases that can be the most impactful for people, like recently there was a 10-year-old rape victim in Nebraska who was denied an abortion. There's a 17-year-old in Florida. Like these are the cases that make national attention. And on the one hand, it's they help demonstrate what it means to have these bans. It means that like a child who is raped will now be forced to give birth at 10 years old, right? Like that can be an illustrative example. On the other hand, it makes it like the vast majority of people, most of the statistics are just on cisgendered women in the United States. The vast majority of women in the United States who have abortions already have 2 children and they're over the age of 30, right? They're just sort of like much more mainline cases of people who cannot or do not want children or more children. And so that's a real narrative struggle that we have here too. Is part of it is, again, like normalizing abortion, because it's not just these extreme cases where of course that person should have access to abortion, but it can also, that narrative can really undermine itself too, where then in the US, and I know in both your contexts as well, this idea like, well, okay, well, we'll keep an exception for life because that would be terrible. Well, one, those exceptions don't work. We know they don't work. Ireland's, you know, your entire campaign illustrated to the world how those exceptions don't work at all. But they also shouldn't have to be exceptions. You shouldn't have to be on the brink of death to be able to control your own body. So those are sort of conflicting narrative realities that we also hold.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much. Just another question here, just around the issue of trans-inclusive and non-binary inclusive language in describing abortion. I mean, we see terms like sort of, women and girls, women and pregnant people. Whenever you refer to pregnant people or people who can become pregnant, do you experience like the same kind of like a flurry of objections that are really kind of like reactionary forces masquerading as concerned individuals, sort of like trying to collect, troll and storm your Twitter feeds and things? Is this something that happens, or is it something that you don't even go near? Particularly, I'm thinking in Poland at the moment, Justyna, and then I'll go to you, Tarah.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the feminist movement, we have a big fight about women and pregnant people. So this is like, it's hard for us sometimes to push this, that there are pregnant people who cannot call themselves women. So this is how the reality is. So even if the feminist movement cannot accept that there are people who can be pregnant and don't want to call them women, then how we go deeper in the society, how we go to those who don't understand what the non-binary is and what's the LGBTQ plus and those this movement is. So it's really hard to push this, and we try to push pregnant people, even don't use this with the uterus, just pregnant people who don't want to be in pregnancies.
And Tarah? And again, just to say that we're very privileged that it's kind of a very minority view here. I mean, it's a lot of very loud people, but few of them.
Yeah, I mean, in the States, it's parallel. I will say that like we tend to get the most pushback from Western Europe. Like there's a weird anti-trans movement that's transcontinental that way. In the United States, the folks that are pushing back about that are not doing it in good faith. There's certainly likely minority views that are like, well, what about women? I'm actually really concerned, but mostly it's used as a political tool so like there's the movement against abortion is the same movement against trans people in the United States. It's funded by the same people, it's run by the same politicians, the same people show up to talk about it, like it's the same thing. And so it's like an anti-rights movement, and a lot of the anti-trans legislation that's moved through at the state level is done to protect cisgender women, and it's just like, frankly, it's total bullshit, and they know that it's baloney, but it's used as a political tool because you can get a minority sort of lathered up about protecting girls in sports when this is not an issue, right? So we don't tend to get, it's not that we don't get any pushback, but we don't tend to get the abortion rights movement in the United States fully understands that, first of all, pregnant people, women are people, so it includes cisgender women, but also that like trans people need abortions and get abortions, and non-binary people need and get abortions. So within the movement itself, it's not as controversial, and the folks who are really sort of screaming the loudest are, they don't just give two figs about cisgender women's rights or about abortion rights. It's the same anti-rights movement. So so every once in a while we'll get sort of stormed on Twitter or something, but not really. Like I mean, there's also just other battles. The anti-trans movement's very strong in the United States, very, very strong at the state level. But it's not because they like care about cisgender women, and everybody knows that. Like, you know, so it's very obvious here.
Great, thanks. And again, in our context, media are part of the problem. This kind of like so-called debate again. There's no debating people's rights and lives in our view. But in one final question, because I know that we're running out of time, because we need to move to kind of like sort of more action focus and solidarity. So this one is specific to you and Poland. Again, Justyna, it's will the recent European Parliament resolution urging decriminalization of abortion and removal of barriers to safe abortion make any difference to the situation in Poland or to your case?
To be honest, I didn't believe at the very beginning that would have any impact. But now I see how stupid things my government is saying, even against the constitution and against the law in Poland. So in spite of feeling like a pawn in the game, I think that the impact is huge, really, because it shows the people living in Poland that it is important. It is important that we have a solidarity from outside of this country, and the people are watching this country and watching what is happening here, and the support we receive shows that it really matters. This is not like because we who lives here feel that our actions, like protesting on the streets, it doesn't matter, but it matters a lot. Even if our politicians like they show nothing about this, they feel I know they feel kind of fear that the other countries are watching on what they do, how they behave, and they be more careful, and they be more acting according to Polish law, and be more careful about what they do with me and with other activists, because I think that this is not the first time the Polish activist is standing in a court.
Great, thank you very much. And that is, wow, bang on time, because at 2:14 I was instructed to move right ahead to the solidarity ask. So, and a great note to end on there, Justyna, in terms of the importance of not just, you know, like whatever, making phone calls and stuff, but taking to the streets and so on visibly. So I'm going to hand back over to my colleague Deirdre, hopefully, who will take it from here.
Everybody, great to listen to you speak, Justyna and Tarah, and yeah, a really important note to end on, I suppose, with a bit of hope that like acting together and in numbers particularly can really make a difference. So yeah, there's lots of things that we can do to push back against the global restrictions on sexual and reproductive rights. We've been sharing a couple of links in the chat, and we'll send some after in an email as well. So really hope that you'll keep in touch and we can link in together on this over the next while. But yeah, you can email Polish authorities by signing the petition in the link, asking them to drop all charges against Justyna and refrain from any further reprisals against her and other activists who are campaigning for sexual and reproductive rights, and who shouldn't face such consequences simply for their activism and promoting all of our human rights. There's also a solidarity action directly to activists in the United States to keep them motivated. It must have been so difficult around the time of the overturn of Roe v. Wade in terms of feeling hopelessness or overwhelming, perhaps, after so many years of campaigning and action. So we really want to reignite, you know, their hope through message of solidarity and resistance. And knowing that we're standing together, it actually made a huge difference, you know, in the lead up to the Repeal the 8 campaign in Ireland, when we received messages of international support. So yeah, it really gave us energy and hope here at the time. So you can email campaigns@aiusa.org with your messages of solidarity, and they'll be passed on to all of the activists around the United States. Yeah, and you can send a message directly to Justyna as well. If you hadn't had a chance to comment in the questions and answer, might be nice for you, Justyna, to hear directly from the people who are attending here today. So I think that link was shared in the chat as well, and we'll reshare all of these in an email again. So if you didn't spot it, that's no problem. We're also going to share a really short Google feedback form. So for all of our events, we really welcome your feedback. We try and make these as relevant and interesting and engaging to you as possible. So please do take just 2 minutes to fill that in. And finally, we'd like to highlight that our work is only made possible through your donations. So we don't accept political or religious funding or from any corporation. So if you would like to donate, the link is there also. So yeah, we're coming to near the end now. Thanks so much for joining us today. Yeah, I just have a few words to recap, and then if there is anything final from Justyna or Tarah as well, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, just from hearing you speak, I suppose what really stood out was the kind of the Justyna, that like women helping other women or pregnant people helping other people, and that's where it all stems from, you know, which is really inspiring. And this was your final comment as well about how people coming together and protest and making this visible is really, really important. And I think that's also a way of overcoming stigma as well, which was a really strong theme there with how people telling their stories and people coming together and normalizing the need for this in so many people's lives, and that it is our healthcare rights. And yeah, really interesting to hear about Kansas, Tarah, and just I suppose that kind of perception that we have that happened, that Fiona mentioned as well, that happened in Ireland, that, oh, we're never going to win this referendum, there's not enough people with us, but they just hadn't spoken up or hadn't had a chance to vote or to kind of raise their voice on the matter. So there was never a true understanding of what the opinion was. So that's really hopeful as well. And I suppose that just the method of targeting the governors in each state seems, you know, really strategic. And I know a lot of people here might have already signed that petition, but we'll share that again as well. So thank you so much. And yeah, I feel this is a great opportunity to look at this in a global context as well, and how unfortunately this is the long game, right? We have to yeah, even if there's a win in a certain constituency or state or country, that those rights can also be taken away or restricted again at another time. So we can stand in solidarity with others when that's happening too. But I'll hand back over to anyone else now for the last couple of minutes if there's any closing words.
I mean, just agreeing with Justyna so much on the solidarity. It matters, like we're tired and there's a lot of work to do, so it matters that way, but also because it shows a sea change in the world around the way we talk about abortion, the way people support it, the way for so many people it's like, duh, you know, that really, really matters, in the same way that, like, you know, if you don't use a plastic straw, does that change climate change? Like, no, but it shows the urgency of that. And so that's partly also why we ask for like a solidarity that we will use then to put together these, you know, bigger solidarity pushes, is because it shows this like broad urgency to do that. So really, you'll get folks on the call, we'll get more from the United States as well. We have more actions coming that we'll be sharing with you all to share out and appreciate that, not just targeting governments, but also technology companies that are censoring information about abortion in the United States. So we're there to fight that at every level, and we can't do it without you. So we just appreciate it so much, and the work that you've done before us and do alongside us, and Justyna as well. It's just such a privilege to speak with you on this call.
Thank you very much. I want to maybe say something about me personally, because I receive a lot of, and I want to thank you, Amnesty International, especially the Polish part, and thank you all of those who sent me those messages with the support. I read them all. I try to read them because our colleagues from Amnesty sending me from time to time a bunch of list of those. So thank you very much. I really appreciate this. And I want to say that reading this and feeling this on my own body, how you support this case and how you support Polish activists, it makes me really brave, and I'm not scared standing in a court and in front of the judge and opposite the ordo juris lawyers.
Great. Well, thank you so much for those words, Justyna, to close it today. And yeah, we'll be still there with you and taking action and hopefully keeping in touch. And yeah, we'll close it a couple of minutes early. Thank you so much to everyone for attending today, and we'll be in touch by email, and feel free to contact us with any follow-up questions or queries. Okay,
Great.
take care. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all. Bye.